Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're taking a look at a PC Engine CD game. And it happens to be one with a silly name, and that being Renny Blaster. Like, really? Renny? Like, is that really the best word you can really describe this game as? It's probably because there's already another game out there called Shadow Blasters that was made before this, and I guess, they couldn't name this game that, because that actually would have been fitting for this game, but oh well, whatever. Dumb name aside though, the game was developed by J-Force and was published by NEC Avenue. And as for J-Force, like, what, is that supposed to be like Jump Force? Nah, instead it was actually a company that put out the first Dragon Force game on the Sega Saturn. And there you go, there's another reference that connects to something else, which is pretty obvious. But I make that Dragon Force joke like all the damn time whenever I talk about it. And it was released in 1995, and it happens to be a side-scrolling beat-em-up. And it's Japan only, so you know how it's gonna go from here, that I'm not gonna be able to talk much about the story, but after witnessing this shit, I can say that this is a pretty crazy game that kinda reminds me of like the old school anime OVA days. So it starts off that there is some blonde-haired vampire dude who wants to take over Europe. Yeah, it totally doesn't sound like Dio at all, whatsoever. And there are two playable characters that have to be the ones to kill his ass, and that happens to be Fujiro and Sishio. Or what I like to call Fujiro is Steven Seagal, because that's kind of what he looks like to me. So yes, just like most beat-em-ups out there, the story is not the reason why you want to play this game, and you know what? I'm fine with that. So let's get moving on to the gameplay. So you can actually pick between the two characters, and the first stage will actually be different, but then after you beat the first stage of either character, you'll pretty much be going in like the same path. So the Steven Seagal looking guy fights with his fists, and the other guy, Sishio, uses like magic. In fact, his magic powers actually look kinda cool. So just like every other game out there, you go from one end of the screen to the other one, then you gotta beat up every single person on screen, and then you fight a boss at the end of each stage, and some stages do have some light platforming elements. And if you pick up scrolls along the way, you can actually gain more special attacks that you can switch between different levels. And these special attacks do not drain your health, but instead you have to hold down the attack button and let it charge and let it go at the one that you want to use. And if you hold down the attack button and then press the jump button, then you'll actually be able to do a different attack. And if you use this with the Steven Seagal looking guy, then you'll be able to use a Rob Van Dam maneuver, which is pretty awesome. So now, let's get right into the game's controls. And the controls in this game, I think are decent for the most part, but there is some things that are important to note here. So I pretty much already went over the button layout, and yeah, it's very easy to figure out. You just have one button that attacks, and if you hold it down, it charges, and of course there's that combination I mentioned earlier. And you can attack while ducking and in the air as well. And you can sprint by double tapping the D-pad in whatever direction. But how do the controls feel? Well, moving around feels okay. The attacking doesn't feel delayed, but the one thing I do have a problem though is the hit detection. Now, the hit detection on your character is fine for the most part, but the problem I have is that the ones on the enemies, I feel like they have like a big advantage over you, because a lot of the times it feels like that they can hit you first. Like these sword enemies, for an example, like they really piss me the fuck off. Also, the jumping in this game feels pretty stiff, and because this game does have some light platforming stuff, unfortunately, it does make those parts pretty rough to get through. But other than these few things though, I do think the gameplay, in terms of controls, it is very playable, but it does have its rough aspects. And now, moving on to other things like the graphics. And the graphics in this game, I think are really nice for PC Engine CD, and for a pretty late one too. So as you can tell by looking at the footage of this game, yeah, there's a lot of crazy shit going on. So yeah, I love all the character designs in the game. Some of them are really cool looking, and some of the bosses are, yes, both really awesome, but yet also really weird too. Like, the one that sticks out to me the most is the one where you gotta fight in, like, a giant, like, toy toy attic, and you gotta beat up like this doll being possessed by this old lady. It's really weird, but I actually really like it. It's so trippy and psychedelic. In a strange way, it kind of reminds me of the hospital scene from the Akira movie. And you also gotta love the fact that you get to fight a dude who transforms into a giant knight, and it takes place in the middle of an airport. Like, could you imagine going to the airport and just seeing this shit happen right in front of you? It'd be one unforgettable moment for sure. But yeah, even without talking about all the crazy shit that happens in this game just has a lot of really cool, nice backgrounds that are very well detailed and have some nice colors that fit nicely with the game's tone. And the game's cutscenes are just like still images, so there's really no animation at all, which I think is a little disappointing. But the one thing I will say about it is that I do think that some of the pictures are pretty cool looking, even though it does look like they are like heavily compressed with like the shadows. But I do think it does bring an interesting aesthetic to it that I do like. In a way, I do find that some of these cutscenes do remind me of some of the backgrounds within the game Twilight on PC98, where it has like realistic photos that were just like heavily like compressed and pixelized, but only that I don't think it looks nearly as good as that game, but it kind of does give me that vibe of it though. But despite of that one thing though, I do find that the graphics overall are really good looking for a PC Engine CD game. And of course, like I always say about this game, is that I just really love like the craziness that they came up with it. Like, there's nothing in this game that looks dull or boring. And as for the game's music, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was pretty great overall. So you got some pretty good rockin' tunes in the game, and you also got some like really good like organ and like keyboard pieces which sound really awesome. And it also has some like dark vibes to it, which I find to be very fitting. But definitely my favorite song in the entire game would have to be some of the boss themes in the game. If I had to complain about anything, I would say is that I kind of wish there was like more songs within the game. Also, I find some of the songs like, well, I do really like them overall. I find some of them aren't like the most catchiest ever, and not like I think everything needs to be upbeat and catchy, you know, but I kind of wish there was a bit more like catchier songs. But otherwise, I find it to be a very underrated OST for the system. Like, it may not be on the same level as Rondo of Blood, the Valis games, or, you know, the shoot-'em-up games like Lords of Thunder or Sapphire and whatever. Like, it may not be on the same level as those, but I do think it is overall, like, a really cool OST. Alright, now, if you want to go out and buy yourself a copy of this game, I'm gonna tell you right now that the cheapest I've seen it for was $500, and there was actually a couple more that were even more than that. So, yeah, let's just not even get into that. But I'll tell you right now that I was able to beat this game within like 30 minutes or so because of that, yeah, so paying like $500 for a game that only lasts 30 minutes, even if the game ended up being some like kick-ass amazing game, I mean, that just ain't worth it to me. But if you want to say fuck you to all that and play it for free, then, well, you know the drill for that. Alright, and as for my overall thoughts on Renny Blaster, is that, well, before we get there, you know, why the hell is this game really called Renny Blaster when you're not blasting things in it? Well, unless you're using the Magician guy, but you know what, I guess they couldn't call the game, like, Renny punch you in the goddamn mouth, but whatever. So on to the main point, is that, yes, this is a game that I do kinda like, but it's not great. In fact, I would say that I think I like this game more than most people would, but I still think that the game is at least somewhat enjoyable and actually is very playable, despite some frustration aspects. So I went over some of the flaws with the game, like I find that the hit detection on the enemies seemed like they have like a more advantage over you, and there's also the platforming is a bit rough. And like I mentioned earlier, that I beat the game in like 30 minutes, and the game really felt like a lot shorter than that, so I feel like this is a game that really should have had like more levels in it. Now I'm not asking for like a shit ton of levels, but I feel like it could have had more, and they could have thrown in more like crazier shit into it. But for what it is, I kinda liked it, and I thought it was at least a very playable game that wasn't like boring at all. And it really makes me wish that we had more, like, beat-em-ups like this, you know, ones that are just, like, weird hodgepodges where it has, like, just all this, like, crazy, like, psychedelic stuff thrown in there. Like, I just really wish we had more like it. But would I recommend the game? Well, if you can emulate it for free, obviously, I would say it's worth a try. For that, I do think it is somewhat entertaining for its weirdness, but I do think that the game is a little rough around the edges and maybe can be frustrating for some. But if you're like me and you want some games that just like don't give any fucks whatsoever, then you know what? There is a chance that you maybe might like this one. But like I've been saying, I think I am a little bit generous with this one because of the fact that I ended up liking it more than I should have, and for that reason I think you should, keep in mind that, yeah, obviously this isn't like a great game that's considered a classic, but it's just some like weird game that's just kind of out there, but yet it's kind of amusing to me. I mean, when it comes to all the weird shit that I've covered, I'll say this. I think this game plays so much better than that Saku Saku fucking crap. So yeah, overall, I ironically kinda like it. So with that said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.